great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a massive cave made of metal and glass. Thousands of seats filled the circular room, each one holding a different type of alien being. Some looked like giant insects with shiny shells. Others were tall and thin like walking trees. A few glowed with their own light, floating above their seats like living stars. In the center of it all stood a creature that made even the bravest council members feel afraid. Ambassador Kepler of the Xanthari Empire was twice as tall as a human, with a body that looked like it was carved from black crystal. His forearms ended in sharp claws, and his head had no face that anyone could understand. Instead, two red lights glowed where eyes might be on other creatures. When Kepler spoke, his voice sounded like glass breaking. The translation machines around the hall turned his words into thousands of different languages, but the fear in his message was the same in every tongue. The Xanthari Empire has been patient, he said, his red eyes sweeping across the council. We offered peace to your worlds. We offered to let you join us willingly. You refused. The council chamber fell, completely silent. Even the air recycling systems seemed to quiet down, as if the machines themselves were afraid to make noise. 17 star systems have fallen to our fleets in the past 3 months, Kepler continued. 17 worlds that chose war over wisdom. Their armies are gone. Their cities burn. Their people serve the Empire now. Chancellor Vextai of the Outer Rim Alliance stood up on shaking legs. His blue skin had turned pale with fear. Ambassador, surely we can find a peaceful solution. The Council is willing to negotiate. Kepler's head turned toward the Chancellor with a sound like grinding stone. The time for talking is over. You have one choice left. Find us the strongest warrior race in the galaxy to fight for you, or surrender your worlds to the Empire. The council members began to whisper among themselves. Their voices mixed together, like the sound of frightened animals in a forest at night. Some spoke of the warrior clans of Rigel 7, who could fight with swords and shields against energy weapons. Others mentioned the cyber soldiers of the machine worlds, who had replaced half their bodies with weapons and armor, but one voice cut through all the others. It belonged to Dr. Marcus Webb, the human representative to the council. He was not. A large man, and his gray hair and lined face made him look more like a grandfather than a diplomat. But when he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. The humans will answer your challenge, Dr. Webb said. The whispers stopped. Every eye, sensor, and other strange organ used for seeing turned toward the small human. Kepler's red lights focused on him like laser beams. The Xanthari ambassador's voice carried something that might have been laughter, though it sounded more like metal scraping against stone. We have studied your species, Dr. Webb. You are weak. Your bodies break easily. You live such short lives that you barely have time to learn to fight before you die. Dr. Webb smiled, which surprised many of the aliens watching. They expected fear or anger, not this quiet confidence. You have studied us, Ambassador, but I do not think you understand us. We understand you perfectly, Kepler replied. Your species wages war constantly. You fight each other over resources, territory, beliefs. You have turned your own world into a battlefield many times. You even created weapons powerful enough to destroy your entire planet. The ambassador gestured with one of his forearms, and a holographic display appeared in the air above the council floor. Images flashed by, showing human conflicts throughout history. Ancient battles with swords and spears. Wars fought with guns and cannons. The terrible destruction of nuclear weapons. This is what we see when we look at humanity, Kepler said. A species that knows only violence. Your greatest achievement is learning new ways to kill each other. Dr. Webb watched the images without changing expression. When the display ended, he nodded slowly. You're right about one thing, Ambassador. Humans do know violence. We have fought many wars. We have created terrible weapons. The council members shifted in their seats. Some of them had hoped the humans would deny these things, would claim to be peaceful. But Dr. Webb continued, his voice growing stronger. You have missed the most important part of our story. And what is that? Kepler asked. Every war we have fought has taught us something. Every weapon we created made us understand the cost of using it. Every time we knocked each other down, We learned to help each other back up. Dr. Webb stood straighter, and though he was still the smallest being in the Great Hall, somehow he seemed to fill more space than before. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It is not our weapons. It is not our willingness to fight. It is our refusal to give up hope, even when everything seems lost. The holographic display flickered and changed. Now it showed different images. Humans, helping each other after disasters. Doctors working to save lives in war zones. Teachers in destroyed cities holding classes under broken roofs. Soldiers sharing their food with enemy children.
This is
also humanity, Dr. Webb said. For every weapon we made, we built a hospital. For every wall we tore down in anger, we built a school to teach the next generation to be better. We learned that the strongest victory is not defeating your enemy. It is helping your enemy become your friend. Kethvera's red lights dimmed slightly. Pretty words, human. But words will not stop Xanthari battle fleets. You asked for our strongest? Warrior, Dr. Webb replied. You will have one. But I promise you this, Ambassador. You do not understand what you are asking for. The Xanthari leaned forward, and his voice dropped to a whisper that somehow everyone in the hall could hear. We have conquered 17 worlds, human. We have faced every type of warrior the galaxy can produce. We have defeated armies of cyber soldiers. Fleets of living ships, entire planets of warrior monks who trained their whole lives for battle. What could your small, weak species possibly send that would frighten the Xanthari Empire? Dr. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Around the hall, thousands of alien beings waited for his answer. The fate of their worlds might depend on what the humans said next. Finally, Dr. Webb smiled again. It was not the smile of someone who was afraid. It was not the smile of someone planning violence. It was the patient, gentle smile of someone who knew a secret that others had not learned yet. Ambassador Kethver, he said, you will find out very soon. But I will give you one warning. When you meet Earth's most dangerous weapon, try to remember that we offered to do this the easy way first. The council session ended with more questions than answers. As the aliens filed out of the Great Hall, they whispered among themselves about what the humans might send. Some thought it would be a massive battleship filled with nuclear weapons. Others imagined cyber-enhanced super soldiers, or perhaps artificial intelligence systems designed for war. None of them guessed the truth. 3 days later, a message arrived at the Galactic Council from Earth. It was very short, and it was signed by someone called Commander Jake Morrison of Earth Defense Command. Request approved, the message read. Earth's most dangerous weapon will arrive at your coordinates in 2 weeks. Prepare suitable quarters for a small team. They will need access to your communication systems and a quiet place to work. Fair warning to all concerned. Once our weapon is deployed, there is no going back. The war will end, one way or another. Message included no technical specifications for weapons or ships. It gave no details about the size of the human force being sent. It did not even say whether Earth was sending military personnel at all, but somehow that made it even more frightening. The massive starship Galactic Unity hung in space like a floating city made of metal and light. It was the largest ship in the Council fleet, home to over 50,000 beings from dozens of different worlds. Today, its docking bays buzzed with activity as everyone prepared to meet Earth's legendary warrior. Admiral Vextel stood in the main docking bay, his purple scales polished to a mere shine for this important occasion. Around him, the highest-ranking military officers from every major species in the galaxy waited with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They had all heard stories about human warfare, about the terrible weapons humans had created, about their willingness to fight even when victory seemed impossible. "What do you think they will send?" asked General Korath, whose people looked like walking rocks with glowing eyes. "I have heard humans can replace their body parts with machines. Perhaps a cyber warrior with built-in weapons? Or maybe one of their nuclear soldiers," suggested Colonel Zixera, her insect-like head tilting as she spoke. "My intelligence reports say humans have weapons that can destroy entire cities in seconds." Admiral Vextel said nothing but his tails swished back and forth with worry. The Xanthari Empire had proven they could defeat any normal military force. If the humans were sending just another soldier, even a very advanced one, it might not be enough to change the tide of this war. The communication system crackled to life. Attention Docking Bay 7, human vessel approaching. Prepare for arrival. Every officer in the bay stood straighter. Some checked their weapons, even though this was supposed to be a friendly meeting. Others activated their personal shield generators. A few of the more nervous ones took steps backward, closer to the exit. The outer doors of the docking bay opened, showing the star-filled darkness of space. A small human ship glided through the opening, so tiny compared to the massive alien vessels that it looked like a child's toy. It was not sleek and dangerous like a warship. It was not armored like a transport for super soldiers. It looked like the kind of ship humans used to carry supplies between planets. The ship settled onto the docking bay floor with a soft hiss of air. Steam rose from its hull as the metal cooled. The assembled military leaders held their breath, waiting to see what monster would emerge from Earth's delivery. The ship's door opened with a quiet click. Out stepped a woman who looked like she might be someone's grandmother. She was not tall, maybe reaching the chest of an average human male. Her hair was gray and pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a plain blue dress and comfortable walking shoes. In one hand, she carried a worn leather bag that looked like it had seen many years of use. In the other hand, she held a metal cup that was steaming slightly. The woman looked around the docking bay, taking note of all the heavily armed aliens. Staring at her, she took a sip from her cup and smiled the kind of smile that humans used when they were being polite to strangers. "Hello there," she said, in a voice that sounded like warm honey. "I'm Margaret Sullivan, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm looking for whoever is in charge of this war situation. I understand you folks have been having some trouble with your neighbors." The silence in the docking bay was so complete that everyone could hear the soft humming of the ship's engines as they cooled down. 50 of the galaxy's most experienced military officers stood frozen, staring at this ordinary-looking human woman. Admiral Vextel's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound came out. "There must be some mistake," he finally managed to say. "We requested Earth's most dangerous weapon." Maggie's smile got a little bigger, and she took another sip from her cup. "Oh, honey, you've got exactly what you asked for. You just do not know it yet." She looked around the group of confused aliens. "Now, which one of you is supposed to be showing me around? I have work to do." The ship's door opened again, and 2 more humans stepped out. The first was a man with dark skin and kind eyes, wearing simple clothes and carrying a medical bag. The second was a tall, thin man with sandy hair and a face that looked like he had spent a lot of time listening to other people's problems. "This is Dr. Paul Martinez," Maggie said, pointing to the man with the medical bag. "He is a doctor who fixes hurt children. And this is Sam Rogers. He helps people solve their problems without fighting." General Korath's rocky face twisted with confusion. "Where are your weapons? Where's your armor? Where are your soldiers?" Maggie patted her leather bag with the same gentle motion she might use to pet a friendly cat. "Right here, General. I have 23 years of crayon story, books, glue sticks, and more patience than you can shake a stick at. Now somebody needs to tell me about these Zenthari folks, because from what I hear, they have forgotten some very important lessons about how to treat other people." Captain Rick Davis, the human military officer who had been assigned to work with the Council fleet, pushed through the crowd of aliens. His face was red with embarrassment. "Ma'am, I think there has been a communication error. This is a war zone. These beings are expecting Earth to send military support." Maggie looked at him with the same expression she used when one of her students said something that was not quite right but showed they were trying to learn. "Captain Davis, is it? I can see you are worried, and that is understandable. Need to trust that the people back home know what they are doing." She turned to address the crowd of alien officers. "Now I know you all were expecting someone different. Maybe someone bigger, someone with more weapons, someone who looks more like your idea of a warrior. But here is the thing about humans that you have not figured out yet." The aliens leaned forward, waiting to hear what secret weapon this strange woman might possess. "The most dangerous thing about humans is not that we know how to fight. Lots of species know how to fight. The most dangerous thing about humans is that we refuse to believe that fighting is the only answer to a problem. Commander Zethlock of the Hegemony Forces stepped forward. His species looked like giant spiders, and his voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. With respect, human, the Zenthari have conquered 17 worlds. They have destroyed entire fleets. They do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They only understand strength. Maggie nodded as if she had heard this argument many times before. Commander, I have spent over 20 years working with children who bite, hit, scream, and throw things when they do not get their way. I have dealt with little ones who think the only way to solve a problem is to hurt someone else. Do you know what I learned from all that experience? The spider-like aliens, multiple eyes focused on her. What? Every single one of those children was acting that way because they were scared, hurt, or had never been taught a better way to handle their feelings. Once you figure out what is really bothering them, once you show them that someone cares about them, once you teach them better ways to get what they need, they stop being dangerous and start being helpful. General Korath made a sound like rocks grinding together. You think the Zenthari Empire is like a group of misbehaving children? I think the Zenthari Empire is like any group of people who have forgotten that there are better ways to solve problems than hurting others, Maggie replied. And I think they have been allowed to continue this behavior because no one has been brave enough to try a different approach. Dr. Martinez stepped forward, his medical bag in hand. Admiral, if I may explain. Back on Earth, we learned a long time ago that sometimes the best way to stop violence is not to fight back with more violence. Sometimes the best way to stop violence is to show people a better way to live. Sam Rogers nodded in agreement. I have worked with some very angry, very dangerous people, gang members, criminals, people who thought the only way to get respect was through fear. But I have never met anyone who could not be reached if you took the time to understand what they really needed. Admiral Vextel's scales had shifted from purple to a pale blue, which among his people was a sign of deep confusion. But how do you propose to reach beings who communicate only through conquest? Zenthari do not even respond to diplomatic messages anymore. Maggie finished the last of whatever was in her cup and tucked it into her bag. Well, Admiral, that is because no one has been speaking their language. You have all been trying to talk to them like they are reasonable adults. But people who go around bullying others are usually people who never learned how to ask for what they need in a nice way. She looked around the group of alien officers, making eye contact with each one. You want to know how to stop the Zenthari? You start by treating them like what they really are. A bunch of scared, angry people who need someone to teach them better ways to solve their problems. Captain Davis shook his head. Ma'am, with all due respect, these are not children. These are hardened military forces with advanced technology and no regard for civilian casualties. Maggie's smile became a little sad, but also more determined. Captain, I have been working with difficult cases for most of my adult life. I have seen children who seemed completely hopeless learn to be kind and helpful. I have watched bullies become protectors and fighters become peacemakers. Just takes the right approach and enough patience. She picked up her bag and looked toward the exit from the docking bay. The planet Kepler 4 for to be had once been a peaceful mining colony. Families from 12 different species had worked together to dig valuable crystals from the planet's mountains. Children had played in the colony's central plaza while their parents worked. Schools had been filled with the laughter of young beings, learning about the galaxy they would inherit. Now the colony looked like a war zone. Black scorch marks covered the buildings where Zenthari energy weapons had burned through walls. The crystal mines stood empty, their entrances blocked by fallen rocks. The playground equipment in the central plaza had been pushed aside to make room for military vehicles and weapons. Most frightening of all were the Zenthari soldiers themselves. They stood over 8 feet tall, their bodies looking like they were carved from black glass. Each soldier had 4 arms that ended in sharp claws, and their faces were hidden behind masks that glowed with red light. They moved through the colony like living shadows, their footsteps making no sound on the ground. The captured colonists huddled in groups around the plaza, guarded by the silent warriors. Adults held their children close, whispering comfort in a dozen different languages. The children pressed against their parents, too scared to cry out loud above the planet. The Galactic Council's war fleet waited in a careful circle. Admiral Vextel stood on the bridge of his flagship looking down at the colony through his ship's cameras. Beside him, Maggie Sullivan sipped from a fresh cup of coffee and studied the scene below. "How long have they been down there?" she asked. "Days," the Admiral replied. "Our intelligence says they are using the colony as a forward base. They have weapons pointed at the civilian population. Any attempt to attack would result in massive casualties among the prisoners." Maggie nodded, watching as a group of Zenthari soldiers marched past a cluster of frightened children.
"What do your military experts suggest?"
"Siege," said General Korath, his rocky face grim. "We surround the planet, cut off their supplies, and wait for them to surrender. It could take months, but it is the safest approach for the hostages. And in the meantime, those children stay scared and hungry," Maggie said quietly. She finished her coffee and handed the empty cup to Dr. Martinez. "I think it is time to go to work." Captain Davis stepped forward quickly. "Be serious. That is a hostile military zone. There are over 300 Zenthari soldiers down there, all armed with advanced weapons." Maggie smiled and patted his shoulder, the way she might comfort a worried student. "Captain, I have handled 38-year-olds during a pizza party. Think I can manage a few overgrown bullies with anger management problems." She walked over to the transportation room, where a small shuttle waited to carry passengers to the planet's surface. Dr. Martinez and Sam Rogers moved to follow her. But she held up a hand to stop them. "This first part is just for me," she said. "Too many new faces might make everyone more nervous than they already are." Admiral Vextel's scales turned pale blue with worry. "Human, this is not wise. We do not know how the Zenthari will react to your presence. They might see you as a threat." Maggie laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Admiral, I am a 52-year-old school teacher wearing a flowered dress and carrying a bag full of art supplies. If the Zenthari see me as a threat, then they have much bigger problems than we thought." The shuttle carried her down through the planet's atmosphere and landed gently in the colony's main plaza. Zenthari soldiers immediately raised their weapons, pointing them at the small craft as its door opened. Red targeting lights danced across the shuttle's hull. Maggie stepped out into the plaza, completely ignoring the weapons aimed at her. She looked around at the scene with the same calm expression she used when walking into a classroom full of upset children. Her eyes quickly found what she was looking for. Near the center of the plaza, a group of young colonists sat huddled together. There were humans, Altarians with their blue-tinted skin, small furry beings from the outer rim, and several other species. The youngest looked to be about 5 years old in human terms. All of them had the wide-eyed look of children who had been scared for too long. Maggie walked straight toward them, her comfortable shoes making soft sounds on the plaza's stone floor. The Zenthari soldiers tracked her movement with their weapons. But something about her calm confidence made them hesitate to fire. She knelt down next to the group of children, bringing herself to their eye level. "Well, hello there," she said, in the same warm voice she had used with the alien officers. "My name is Miss Maggie. I'm a teacher, and I am here to help." The youngest child, a little Altarian girl with tears on her blue cheeks, looked up at her with wide eyes. "Are you here to save us?" she whispered. "I am here to make sure you are safe and happy," Maggie replied. She reached into her leather bag and pulled out a small stuffed animal. It was a brown teddy bear with button eyes and a red ribbon around its neck. The bear looked old and well-loved, like it had comforted many children over the years. "This is Mr. Buttons," Maggie said, offering the bear to the little girl. "He is very good at helping people feel better when they are scared. Would you like to hold him for a while?" The child took the bear with shaking hands and immediately hugged it tight. Some of the fear left her face, replaced by wonder at this kind stranger who had appeared from nowhere. The other children began to move closer, drawn by the gentle warmth in Maggie's voice. A human boy of about 7 asked, "Are the bad soldiers going to hurt us?" Before Maggie could answer, a shadow fell across the group. General Dexmore, the Zenthari commander, stood over them like a living tower of black crystal. His forearms were crossed, and the red lights in his mask focused on Maggie with laser intensity. "Human," he said, his voice sounding like breaking glass. "You will stand and identify yourself immediately, or face the consequences of trespassing." "In Zenthari territory?" Maggie looked up at him without standing, one hand still gently stroking the hair of a frightened child. "Shush," she said firmly, using the same tone she used when adults interrupted her class time. "Cannot you see I am working with children here? Adults can talk later. Right now, these little ones need attention." General Vexmore's red lights flickered with confusion. In his long military career, no one had ever told him to be quiet. The concept was so foreign that his translation system struggled to process it properly. You dare to silence a Zenthari general," he stammered. "I dare to put children's needs first," Maggie replied, still not standing. She pulled out a box of crayons and some paper from her bag. "Now, who wants to draw me a picture of their home planet? I would love to see where you all come from." Children's faces lit up with excitement. Drawing was something normal, something safe, something that reminded them of better times. Soon they were gathered around Maggie in a circle, comparing crayons and talking about their favorite colors. General Vexmore stood frozen, unsure how to respond to this unprecedented situation. His soldiers looked to him for orders, but he had no training for dealing with someone who simply ignored his authority and went about their business. As the afternoon wore on, something strange began to happen. The Zenthari soldiers, despite their orders to maintain security, found themselves watching Maggie work with the children. They saw her help a shy outer rim child find the courage to share his drawing. They watched her gently settle an argument between two human boys over who got to use the red crayon first. They observed as she turned a group of scared, crying children into a happy classroom. One soldier, a young warrior named Kepler, moved closer to get a better view. He had been trained from birth to be a perfect fighting machine, but he had never... "You seen anything like this before?" The human female seemed to possess some kind of magic that made frightened beings feel safe. Maggie noticed him, watching, and looked up with a smile. "Hello there," she said, as if talking to an 8-foot-tall alien warrior was the most natural thing in the world. "Would you like to see what the children are working on?" Kextel's mask tilted downward to look at the papers scattered around. The drawings were simple, the way children's art always was, but they were full of bright colors and happy memories. One showed a family standing in front of a house with a yellow sun overhead. Another depicted strange alien flowers under a purple sky. "They are pictures of home," Maggie explained. "These children have been away from everything familiar for almost a week. Drawing helps them remember the good things and feel less afraid." Kextel stared at the drawings for a long moment. Something stirred in his memory, something from long ago, before the war, before the training, before he became a soldier. "I remember drawing pictures when I was young," he said quietly. "Of course you do," Maggie said warmly. "All children love to create beautiful things. What did you like to draw?" "Crystal gardens," he replied, his voice growing softer. "My homeworld has gardens made of living crystal that sing in the wind. I used to sit among them and draw the patterns the light made when it shone through them." Maggie reached into her bag and pulled out a fresh piece of paper and a set of colored pencils. "Would you like to draw one now? I think these children would love to see what crystal gardens look like." 3 days had passed since Maggie arrived at the colony, and the changes were impossible to ignore. What had started as a small art class in the plaza had grown into something much bigger. Every morning, children and Zenthari soldiers gathered around Maggie as she taught them new things. Every evening, they shared stories about their homes and families. Dr. Martinez had set up a medical station near the fountain in the center of the plaza. Word had spread quickly that the human doctor would treat anyone who was hurt, regardless of which side they were on. Colonist children with scraped knees sat next to Zenthari warriors with damaged equipment, all waiting patiently for their turn. The first Zenthari soldier to visit Dr. Martinez had been Kextel, the young warrior who had started drawing crystal gardens. A piece of broken machinery had cut his arm, leaving a deep gash in his crystal-like skin. He had approached the medical station nervously, unsure if the human doctor would help an enemy soldier. Dr. Martinez had simply smiled and gestured for him to sit down. "Let me take a look at that," he had said, examining the wound with gentle hands. "This is going to need some cleaning and bandaging, but you will be fine." As he worked, Dr. Martinez talked to Kextall the same way he talked to all his patients. He asked about the soldier's homeworld, his family, his interests outside of military service. By the time the bandage was in place, Kextall was telling him about his younger sister who collected rare crystals and his mother who taught music to children. "You are very kind," Kextall had said as he prepared to leave. "On my world, doctors only treat Zenthari. They do not help enemy wounded." Dr. Martinez had looked sad at this news. "That is unfortunate. Where I come from, we believe that pain is pain, no matter who is feeling it. Everyone deserves to feel better." Word of the doctor's kindness spread through the Zenthari ranks like wildfire. Soon soldiers were coming to him with injuries they had been hiding, equipment problems they could not solve, and questions about human medicine. Dr. Martinez treated them all with the same care he showed to the colonist children. Sam Rogers had taken a different approach. The tall social worker spent his time moving quietly through the colony, talking to anyone who wanted to listen. He sat with homesick colonists and helped them write letters to family members on other worlds, mediated disputes between different groups of prisoners who were starting to get on each other's nerves after days of being crowded together. But most importantly, he talked to the Zenthari soldiers about things no one had ever asked them before. He wanted to know about their lives before the war, their hopes for the future, their fears and dreams. Many of the soldiers had never been asked such questions. They were used to being seen only as weapons, not as people with feelings and thoughts. One evening, Sam sat with a group of 5 Zenthari warriors who were supposed to be guarding the main entrance to the colony. Instead of standing at attention, they were sitting in a circle, talking quietly while they watched Maggie work with a group of children nearby. "Tell me about your family," Sam said simply. It was the same question he asked everyone, but it always seemed to surprise the Zenthari soldiers. The oldest warrior, Zexmar, shifted uncomfortably. "Zenthari do not speak of personal matters with outsiders," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I understand," Sam replied, "but I am curious. When this war is over, what will you go home to? Who is waiting for you?" The question hung in the air for a long moment. Finally, the youngest soldier, barely more than a child himself by Zenthari standards, spoke up. "I have a bondmate," he said quietly. "She grows food crystals in the northern provinces. We were supposed to have a joining ceremony when I returned from my first campaign." "That sounds wonderful," Sam said with genuine warmth. "What is her name?" "Falana," the young soldier replied, and just saying her name seemed to make him happy. "She sends me messages sometimes, when communication is permitted. She tells me about the crystal gardens and the new growing techniques she is learning." Another soldier joined the conversation. "I have 3 offspring," he said. "They are still very young. The eldest is learning to sing the traditional songs of our people." Soon all 5 warriors were talking about their lives back home. Shared pictures stored in their communication devices. They told stories about parents and siblings and friends. They spoke of hobbies and interests that had nothing to do with war or conquest. Sam listened to all of it, with the patient attention he had learned from years of social work. He asked follow-up questions that showed he was really interested in their answers. He remembered details from previous conversations and brought them up later, proving that he cared about them as individuals. Meanwhile, Maggie's classroom had expanded beyond simple art projects. She had convinced General Dexmore to let her set up a proper learning space in one of the colony's empty buildings. The general had agreed mostly because he was curious about what the human teacher was trying to accomplish. What he found when he visited the makeshift school amazed him. Human children sat next to young Zenthari soldiers, all of them working together on math problems. Altarian youngsters taught Zenthari warriors how to speak their native language, while the soldiers showed the children how to read Zenthari crystal writings. The most surprising sight was Maggie herself, standing at the front of the room with a piece of chalk in her hand, teaching a mixed class of children and soldiers about the different types of stars in the galaxy. She made the lesson fun and interactive, asking questions that made everyone think, encouraging shy students to participate, and celebrating every small success. Miss Maggie asked a human boy named Danny, "Why do some stars burn blue and others burn red?" "Excellent question, Danny," Maggie replied. "Can anyone help him figure out the answer?" A Xanthari soldier named Texfar raised one of his 4 hands. "The color depends on how hot the star burns," he said. "Blue stars are much hotter than red stars." "That's exactly right, Texfar," Maggie said with a proud smile. "You clearly paid attention during your navigation training. Can you tell the class how knowing star colors helps pilots find their way through space?" As Texfar explained stellar navigation to the fascinated children, General Dexmore felt something he had not experienced in years. It was a feeling from his youth, from before the war, when learning new things had been a joy instead of just a tool for better fighting. After the class ended, Maggie approached the general. "You have been watching us for several days now," she said. "Would you like to join us tomorrow? I think you might enjoy it." General Vexmore's red-eye lights flickered with uncertainty. "I am a military commander, not a student. Everyone is a student," Maggie replied. "The day we stop learning is the day we stop growing. And I have a feeling there are things you could teach these children that no one else could." That evening, something unprecedented happened. General Dexmore sent a message to his superiors in the Xanthari High Command. It was supposed to be a routine status report, but instead it was filled with questions. "Why are we fighting this war?" he wrote. "What do we hope to gain by conquering worlds full of people who just want to live peaceful lives and raise their children? When did we decide that fear was better than friendship?" The message was intercepted by Galactic Council intelligence and forwarded to Admiral Vexthal, who read it with growing amazement. He immediately called Dr. Martinez and Sam Rogers to his ship for a meeting. "How is this possible?" the Admiral asked, showing them the intercepted message. 3 days ago, this general was a ruthless military commander. Now he sounds like someone questioning everything he has ever believed. Dr. Martinez smiled. "Admiral, you are seeing the power of human medicine at work. Not the kind that heals bodies, but the kind that heals hearts and minds." "I do not understand, Admiral," Vexthal said. Sam Rogers leaned forward in his chair. "What Maggie, Paul, and I do is not really that complicated. We treat people like people. We listen to them, show them that someone cares about them as individuals. We help them remember who they were before anger and fear took over their lives. But these are hardened military soldiers," the Admiral protested. "They've been trained from birth to be weapons. And underneath all that training," Dr. Martinez said, "they are still people. They still have hopes and dreams and fears. They still love their families and remember what it felt like to be children. All we did was remind them of those things." On the planet, Maggie tucked the last of the children into their makeshift beds. The colonist children and young Xanthari soldiers had started sleeping in the same area, no longer afraid of each other. Some of the older children had even started teaching the soldiers lullabies from their honed. As she turned off the lights in the temporary dormitory, Maggie saw General Dexmore standing in the doorway. His massive form was silhouetted against the starlight, but there was something different about his posture. He no longer stood like a conqueror. He stood like someone who was lost and looking for direction. "Miss Maggie," he said quietly, "may I ask you something?" "Of course, General. What is on your mind? How did you know?" he asked. "How did you know that we were not really enemies? How did you know that we could be reached?" Maggie smiled, the same gentle smile she had been using all week. The alarms on the Xanthari command ship started screaming at exactly 0300 hours, Galactic Standard Time. High Admiral Kethsel, Supreme Commander of the Xanthari Invasion Force, jolted awake in his command chamber. Red warning lights flashed across the walls, and urgent messages scrolled across his communication screens. "What is happening?" he demanded as he rushed to the bridge. His aide, Commander Vexgal, met him with a face full of confusion and worry. "Hi, Admiral. We have lost contact with the advance force on Kepler 44-B. General Dexmore has not responded to communications for over 12 hours. Long-range sensors show no signs of battle damage or distress, but something is definitely wrong." Ketzel's red-eye lights burned brighter with anger. "Wrong how? Be specific, Commander." "The General's last transmission was unusual, sir. He was asking questions about our war objectives and the purpose of the invasion. He wanted to know why we were fighting beings who only wanted to live peacefully with their families. The High Admiral's forearms clenched into fists. That does not sound like General Vexmore is one of our most dedicated commanders. There must be some kind of enemy weapon affecting their minds. That is what we thought too, sir. So we sent the reconnaissance ship Dark Crystal to investigate. They reported seeing the most impossible thing. What did they see? Commander Vexcal activated the main display screen. Fuzzy images appeared, taken from a great distance by hidden cameras. They showed the colony plaza, but instead of the military occupation everyone expected, they saw something that looked like a peaceful gathering. Xanthari soldiers sat in circles with alien children and adults, all of them talking and laughing. Together, human medical personnel moved freely among both prisoners and guards, treating anyone who needed help. In the center of it all, an older human female stood in front of a mixed group of children and soldiers, teaching them something. That involved pointing at the stars overhead. "This makes no sense," Kethsel said, staring at the impossible scene. "Our soldiers do not socialize with prisoners. They do not attend. Whatever this is supposed to be, there is more, sir. We managed to intercept some personal communications from our soldiers to their families back home. They are writing about things they have learned, people they have met, stories they have heard. One of them sent a picture he drew of crystal gardens to his sister. Another wrote a poem about the different colored suns he learned about from human children." The High Admiral felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was not how conquered populations were supposed to behave. This was not how Xanthari soldiers were supposed to act. "Prepare the main fleet for immediate departure. We'll go to this colony ourselves and discover what weapon the humans have used against our forces." 3 days later, the massive Xanthari war fleet arrived at Kepler 42b. 200 ships filled the sky above the small colony, their black hulls blocking out the sun. Every weapon was charged and ready to fire. Every soldier was prepared for battle. What they found when they scanned the surface was even more confusing than the reconnaissance reports. The colony showed no signs of battle damage. There were no defensive positions, no weapons installations, no military preparations of any kind. Instead, their sensors detected what appeared to be a large outdoor festival. Colorful banners hung between buildings. Tables were set up in the plaza, covered with food and drinks. Children of multiple species ran around playing games, while adults watched and laughed. And everywhere mixed in with the colonists and prisoners were Xanthari soldiers participating in the celebration. "This is impossible," Kessel muttered. "Our soldiers would never abandon their duties for a party." "Hi, Admiral," his communications officer called out. "We are receiving a transmission from the surface. It is ... General Dexmore, sir." Put him on screen immediately. The image that appeared on the main display was shocking. General Vexmore stood in the colony plaza, but he looked completely different from the last time anyone had seen him. His armor was clean, but not polished to military perfection. His posture was relaxed instead of rigid. Most disturbing of all, he appeared to be holding hands with a small human child who was showing him something in a picture book. "Hi, Admiral Kethsel," General Dexmore said, his voice carrying none of its usual military precision. "I am glad you have arrived. There is something very important I need to discuss with you. General, report your status immediately. Are you under some kind of enemy mind control? Have the humans used a weapon against you?" Dexmore actually smiled, an expression that looked strange on his crystal features. "In a way, yes, sir, they have used a weapon. But not the kind you are thinking of." Behind the general, the camera picked up movement. A middle-aged human woman approached, carrying a steaming cup in one hand and what appeared to be art supplies in the other. She walked right up to the general and patted his arm the way someone might comfort a nervous friend. "Is this the boss you were telling me about?" she asked Thixmore in a warm, friendly voice. "The one who is worried about you?" "Yes, Miss Maggie." "Hi, Admiral Ketzel. I would like you to meet Miss Margaret Sullivan. She is a teacher from the planet Earth, and she has taught me more in the past week than I learned in 20 years of military service." The human woman looked directly into the camera and smiled. "Hello there, Admiral. I have heard so much about you from your soldiers. They speak very highly of you, you know. They say you are a good leader who cares about their safety and welfare." Kethsel stared at the screen in complete bewilderment. "General Lexmore, what is the meaning of this? Why are you socializing with enemy personnel? Where's your military?" "Discipline, Admiral," Dexmore replied. "That is exactly what I wanted to discuss with you. I have been thinking a lot about our military discipline, our mission objectives, and the war in general. I have some questions. Questions are not appropriate from a field commander to a superior officer. With respect, sir, I think questions are the most important thing we can have right now. For instance, why are we fighting this war? What do we hope to accomplish by conquering peaceful colonies? How does making children afraid of us serve the greater good of the Zenthari people?" The bridge of the command ship fell completely silent. Never in the history of the Zenthari Empire had a general questioned the wisdom of their superiors in such a direct manner. Miss Maggie stepped closer to the camera. "Admiral, I know this must be very confusing for you. Your soldiers were following orders, doing what they thought was right for their people. But sometimes we all need to step back and ask ourselves if the path we are on is really taking us where we want to go." "You are the enemy," Kessel said, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. "You are trying to weaken our resolve with your words." "I am a teacher," Maggie replied simply. "My job is to help people learn and grow. One of the most important lessons anyone can learn is that there are always better ways to solve problems than hurting other people." She gestured to the scene behind her, where Zenthari soldiers and colony children were setting up tables for what appeared to be a large communal meal. "Look at your soldiers, Admiral. Really look at them. Do they seem weaker to you? Do they seem defeated?" Ketzel studied the images more carefully. His soldiers were laughing, talking, helping with preparations for the meal. But they also looked more alert, more engaged, more alive than he had seen them in years of military service. "They look different," he admitted. "They look happy," Miss Maggie said. "They look like people who have remembered what they are fighting, for instead of just what they are fighting against." At that moment, a young Zenthari soldier appeared on screen. It was Kextal, the warrior who had been the first to join Maggie's art class. He approached his general with obvious excitement. "General, this more, Miss Maggie. Look what I have finished." He held up a large drawing that showed Zenthari and humans working together to build something beautiful. Gardens and buildings and schools all mixed together under a sky full of colorful stars. "This is wonderful, Kextel," Maggie said with genuine pride. "You have really improved your artistic skills this week. Would you like to show Admiral Kethsel what you have learned about architecture and planning?" The young soldier looked directly at the camera with the enthusiasm of a child showing off a school project. "Hi, Admiral. Miss Maggie taught us that instead of conquering worlds, we could help build them. Instead of making people afraid of us, we could make them happy to see us coming. Look," he pointed to different parts of his drawing. "Here is a Zenthari crystal garden growing next to human farms. Here is a school where our children learn together with alien children. Here is a medical center where Dr. Martinez teaches our healers new techniques for helping people feel better." Kethsel found himself leaning forward to study the drawing more closely. Despite his military training, despite years of conditioning that told him conquest was the only path to security, something about the young soldier's vision appealed to him. "This is very nice artwork," he said carefully, "but it is not realistic. Different species cannot simply live together in harmony." "Why not?" asked Miss Maggie. "What prevents it besides fear and misunderstanding?" Before Ketzel could answer, his communications officer called for his attention.